We are excited not only for this event, but for what comes after this event, which is a break.
Yeah.
We are imagining that you're probably feeling the same. So for anybody who has joined us today, we are exceptionally grateful because we think that this takes more to join this session than it did for the one at the beginning of lockdown, where, you know, we were all looking for things to do. So thank you for joining us today. Celeste and Vanessa and I are super excited to be having our last one for the year, not because it's our last one, but because we've all got through the year and it's our fifth one. And, you know, it started off as one and then it just carried on and on and on. And so we're so encouraged by all of you who have been joining us. And Celeste has put together this fantastic roller coaster slide. Love it, Celeste.
The official emotional roller coaster.
There we go. There we go. I had to put this together just to say this is how much we've accomplished as a community. In fact, we've stuck together and we've weathered the storm, and it's been a roller coaster ride for all of us. So I had to just impress on you how amazing it's been.
Totally amazing. Totally amazing. Thanks, Celeste. And I think something that we were also really excited about that this represents is collaboration. And I think that's been one of the themes of this year is collaboration over competition for many industries, where people have just found each other. And I know Celeste and Vanessa and I each focus on different parts of the employer-employee life cycle. So we have a perfect collaboration that we really enjoy. And we're really excited to talk to you about what's beneath the mask for 2021. And we're glad that I think it was Celeste who came up with that title. And it's perfect because we probably still be wearing masks in 2021.
Absolutely.
It's not over yet.
And sorry, Jane, just to touch on your point there, it's amazing to see an industry that's so typically the recruitment industry that's always been my candidates, not sharing clients, working, you know, in a silo by yourself. The collaboration has been amazing. So yeah, it's been good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Long may it last. Great point, Van.
Absolutely.
So as always, we have three vital questions to ask ourselves over this happy lunchtime. And so we're gonna kick off, and as we always do, each person will take one question, and Van always loves the first question because she's the most focused of all of us. She has the ability to focus on many things at once.
As I'm letting people in, monitoring the chat, all of those things all at once.
Absolutely, that's why you got the job.
Yeah, so the real reason why I take the first question always is that because I'll lose focus and forget about subsequent questions. But while we started and I'm fresh, it's a good idea for me to start with the first question. So pretty much,
take us off.
The first question that we've got is the year 2020 in review. What did we learn? And you know, it could have been a good learning, it could have been a bad learning. You know, it's been such an interesting year, and I'd actually like to hear from Jane. Let's hear your thoughts on this first, and then I'll answer after you, both of you wonderful ladies have been.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Van. So what we decided we'd do is we'd share about industry learnings that we've seen and we've experienced, and then we'd also share about personal learnings. So starting off with the industry, and I mean, most of my focus is in the recruitment industry. So training companies to hire the right people and coaching people in career transition. So I think the main things that I've seen in this industry are kind of, if I take it from the beginning, we had that word that started off as super cool and then became slightly annoying called pivot. I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but everyone had to pivot. And as soon as you pivoted, you had to pivot some more. And so what we saw recruitment consultancies doing is changing the way that they offer a service to their clients based on what their clients want. So almost finding out a new way of working, not necessarily doing the whole end-to-end cycle, but really figuring out which are the pain points in their client's life cycle and plugging in there. And I'll share a couple of links afterwards in the chat box, but we had an interesting interview earlier this year with Tim Glenn from Servicruit and Justin Rawls. And they talked about how they were taking aside one day a week just for innovation, just to figure out how to do things differently. I think other strong themes that I've seen coming through in the industry are things that were echoed in the APSO conference this week. for those of you who attended. So one of them was a push for recruiters not to negotiate fees. Mm-hmm. I think something that people wanted to do and had to kind of be urged not to do is don't take away from your service offering, because otherwise how are you going to reestablish that fee afterwards? So more of the learning during 2020 has been around rather set up a payment plan, rather, I mean, it's not a new teaching, it's been around for a while, but rather negotiate parts of your service that you're going to take away if you're going to take away some of the fee. But don't just take your fee to rock bottom. And Suki and James really spoke about that at the APSO conference. And then what Vanessa was saying in the beginning about collaboration. Jason Elias, also at the APSO conference, talked about how 30% of his revenue comes from his competition. So he would rather collaborate and build a stronger network and make double the amount of placements, making the same as if he made half the amount of placements on his own. So those are really strong themes and learnings that I've seen in the recruitment industry. And then for myself, I mean, I've got a number of things I learned from very simplistic turn on the TV, which I genuinely did not know how to do at the beginning of this year, through to virtual facilitation on tech platforms that I wasn't used to. So I've actually been facilitating virtually for about 4 or 5 years on Cisco WebEx. But I'd always loved the idea of a Teams. And then along came Teams and I could see, oh, I can see how I can use that. So I think what 2020 has taught me is there's nothing I can't learn. And I know many of you have probably felt that, because there's things we had to learn very quickly, or we were postponing learning that we had to kind of jump on and, okay, now this is it. And I think all of us, along with others, discovering ourselves, what do we really value? But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Celeste.
Yes.
What are your learnings, industry and personal, from this year?
Completely agree. I think what really shone through for me is the fact that relationships are so strong. And I think the long-standing relationships that you have built with clients over the years, I won't say pivoted, but I will say that if anything, though that is what really resurrected with me. The fact that they wanted you to walk the road with them. They wanted you to walk that unknown road with them, because they wanted to know that you were going to handhold them. Whichever way the crisis was going to go, they wanted you to actually walk that road. And I think, just like employer brands, that is really what made personal brands shine out the most when it came to the recruitment industry. The other thing that also what really shone through was the fact that we must never assume. We must never assume that companies are going to retract back into their shells because of the crisis and the pandemic, because it was actually proven wrong that, in fact, there was a lot of innovation and creativity that came out of this, and a lot of clients still saw projects through, even though the odds were against them. So that really threw me out completely, because I expected, yes, proposals were on the table and proposals were withdrawn, but there were still companies that followed through on their strategies that they wanted to see through. From a personal perspective, and this is more from me as a person, being a control freak in this industry and being in this climate just doesn't work. It doesn't cut it. It actually doesn't work. You can't be a control freak in a COVID pandemic or a crisis, because anything's going to come your way, whether it be in the workplace, in the industry, or whether it be in the personal life. You just have to roll with those punches. So from a personal perspective, that's what I learned. And I think that plays its part in the industry, and it plays its part in your work life as well. You have to be ready for anything. Over to you, Van.
Very true.
Cool. So, I totally echo what you two ladies have to say. I really and truly do. Just from my perspective, from an industry perspective, is that it literally turned the industry on its head. And to be honest, I think that it was needed. I think that there was a lot of people who needed to rethink the processes. You know, there's a lot of people that I go to train, and I was an agency, not wanting to give away my age. You know, I must have just been around 12 at the time when I was an agency, but it was a good 12, 13 years ago. And what happened is that people were doing recruitment by getting in a role description from a client, picking a CV off a job board and submitting those candidates. And for me, the people that were still doing that during the time of a pandemic were slowly getting quieter and quieter and quieter. Because what I was hearing from the client side was, how are these agencies adding value to the business? And I think that what we've realized during this 2020 is that the agencies, and there are several out there, there's several actually sitting on this call at the moment, and I salute them, is that you've managed to keep your doors open, you've managed to keep operating. So that means that you've been adding value. So I'm immensely proud of some of the names that I see sitting on this call, because it was a panic. I mean, lockdown hit and suddenly there was a complete headcount freeze. What do you do when that's your business? So for me, the companies that I've been working with, what I really enjoyed the thinking around, let's break down the services that we offer, because there's an absolute crapload that goes into full 360 recruitment. It's not just one part. And the people that actually segmented all of the services which they delivered to clients and actually could monetize each step of the way have actually been really successful. And that for me was such great, like thinking out of the box, being creative. I loved it. The second thing from an industry perspective, or what really highlighted for me how important it's become, is just this branding thing. And more recruitment and branding are literally becoming the same thing, because I'm seeing a lot of competition between marketing teams who are trying to bring in the business, talent acquisition teams who are trying to attract talent. They're essentially doing the same thing, but they go about it in such complete different ways that they're actually having boxing matches about it. So I think, you know, from what we learned in 2020 is the importance of branding, but not only company branding, employer branding, talent attraction, personal branding. For me, this has become so important, and people really need to focus on this in 2021. From a personal note, what have I learned? I've learned out that burnout is real. I've learned that when you just thought that you were really busy in 2019 and you were stressed and starting your own business was difficult, 2020 came along. And as Celeste was saying this morning, is that how resilient and how strong we are as human beings. So personally, what I've learned is that actually anything is possible. I had a 3-year plan to get my business international. Now, as of November, more than 50% of my income is coming from international clients. And that for me is just phenomenal. That was one of the real positive learnings. You can form phenomenal relationships with people online. You really and truly can. And I encourage everyone to just start developing and growing a global mindset, because I promise you now, you can achieve it. You really and truly can. So if anyone wants to comment on question 1 or anything like that, or you want to ask anyone a particular question, you guys are all being very quiet, very well behaved. Maybe you're eating lunch, as I was eating a peanut butter and syrup sami in my previous meeting, and trying to explain to international people around the world about how peanut butter and syrup is a thing in South Africa. So
they were very jealous.
And then in the meantime, we can move on to question 2. But guys, please get involved, participate. The more you give, the more you're going to get back.
Please do. Celeste.
Okay. All right. So I'm asking this question of you, Jane.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So the next question is, what ways are we leaving behind in 2020? And yeah, what is it that we want to leave behind? Because obviously there's lessons learned, there's good stuff, but there's bad stuff as well, that you might want to reflect on.
Sure. I mean, I think there's so much we're leaving behind, and there's so much that people are saying, I hope we really do leave that behind and we don't come back to it when we can see each other more in person. mean, you know, for us, we're entering into our second wave, so we're trying to be careful still. But I think things, again, that I've experienced and that I've been hearing globally through different conferences and webinars actually talk to what you said, Celeste, about control. And I can relate, being another control freak. But one of the big urges to leave behind is control, and to replace that with trust. And I think in one of the conferences that I was part of, there was a chap from the Netherlands, Jan Reken. And he said COVID-19 has accelerated the move from control to trust. And it was interesting in chairing one of the panels of top recruiters this week at the APSO conference. So there was somebody from South Africa, Noni, and then there was Mary from Australia and Ollie from New Zealand. And these are award-winning leading recruiters. And they said the thing that they kept saying that they have in common that underpins their success is their ability to build trust. So I think we're seeing that from an external provider and an external partner perspective. And we're also seeing the importance of that in the workplace, where there's less emphasis on let's try and find all the tools we can to check up on people and make sure they're working hard. Let's rather develop trust and use a coaching approach to inspire our employees, to help them find their own solutions and to help empower them. So I think that's something that we are leaving behind. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's a work in progress, and especially in South Africa, I think that's something that we have to leave behind. And I think the other thing that we were talking about at that L&D Cares Global Career Summit is that employers are taking less responsibility to upskill their employees, and there's more of a balanced approach. So each individual is now taking ownership for their own development to be upskilled. So instead of, I mean, we've got so much information, it's an overload, there's webinars coming out of our ears. So instead of just providing information, it's more an approach of let me find someone who can coach me to focus on what's really important for me personally to grow in, because that's where I want to further my career, rather than let me just wait and see what training program my employer provides for me. So I think those are two things that I've seen in the industry that are being left behind. And yeah, I think just a couple of personal things that I'm leaving behind in 2020 kind of goes with our whole, I think I'm excited about being able to connect so quickly with people globally, but I've realized that we're all going through a tough time. And the more I connect with people, the more I realize everyone is going through very similar things. So what that's really helping me leave behind is a sense of taking things personally. I'm such a deeply empathetic person. And if I sense that anything is off for somebody, I immediately think, oh my goodness, did I hurt them? Did I offend them? Is there anything I can do to help? How can I rescue them from this tough time? And so for me, it's been a personal learning journey of sometimes I just need to be able to be there with someone and just to stand or just to walk through it with them. I can't change it. I can't take control. Let me just rather go through it with them. And another learning journey is to not freak out when people walk into my webinar. Go with the flow.
Exactly.
Awesome. But Van, what things are you thinking we're leaving behind for 2020?
Well, I want to mention one thing that I'm hearing, a lot from the global recruiting and sourcing community, and that is that, the one thing that we cannot leave behind, and one thing that we tried to leave behind for a long time, is the whole idea around diversity and inclusion. Because diversity and inclusion is such a global hot topic at the moment. And I know as South Africans, and we're all South Africans on the call, is that, we've got a completely different view on this. We've got government systems in place. But just to be prepared, that Jane touched on it, how we're having webinar overloads and all of those things. DNR coming from the global community is about to become a massive thing. So that's something that we're not going to leave behind. Something that the industry, I do believe, needs to leave behind is this feeling of that recruiters and talent acquisition teams are the ugly red-headed stepchild of the HR department, because that really, really irritates me. What I find is that recruiters don't actually represent themselves well. They don't feel empowered or confident enough in order to be able to have courageous conversations. I mean, the recruiters and the TA teams are the subject matter experts. They know what's going on in the market. They should be the ones who are calling the shots when it comes to the recruitment process. You know, it shouldn't affect the recruiter if the hiring manager's having a crap day and he's actually said no to a really good candidate because he didn't like the blouse that she was wearing or something along those lines. So that is something that I want recruiters, talent acquisition professionals to leave behind, this feeling of I'm the underdog, because it's gone on for too long, and it really and truly is something that we need to change.
Yeah.
Other things that I want to that I want to see changing and being left behind is how from an agency recruiter perspective, how we only are getting paid once the candidate has been successful and sitting in their role for a month or 3 months or whatever your T's and C's account for. I think that there's a lot of different things in the recruitment process that could be carved up, and you could charge a certain fee for certain bits in that process. I'm doing quite a bit of consulting with agencies at the moment around that, and I just think that this waiting for payment once the candidate's been successful it's too risky. I listened to an awesome podcast yesterday with Mark Cohen, who a lot of you know, and he was talking about, if you ask a recruiter, what do they do? And people will say, well, I place people and I hire people, but essentially they don't. Recruiters and talent acquisition specialists don't have that final decision. What you're doing is that you are finding the best talent and you're putting them in front of business. No one who I think in the recruitment industry has that final decision. It comes down to a company, a hiring manager, or someone like that. And we need to realize is that how can we charge for something that's actually something that's out of our control? And this is an area that I really want to focus on. I want to grow the consulting side of my business next year and get people to realize this, because it's madness. From a personal perspective, what am I leaving behind? Well, one of my great learnings from this year is that, don't overextend yourself. You don't have to say yes to every webinar and podcast and I don't know, the opening of whatever that's coming your way. Kind of just pace myself a little bit better. Another thing that I don't quite know how I'm going to leave behind, but I'd love to leave behind is a couple of these time zones. Getting up at 3:30 to start trading at 4 to New Zealand and Australia has been a challenge, especially the nights when I'm trading to the States, starting at like 7 and then starting a 4-hour training session. So yeah, it's I think it's learnings. I've had a lot of learnings about myself. I have realized that I absolutely love what I do. I will be continuing, but I think I just need to calm down the pace a bit. Celeste, over to you.
Sure, no, not in the same league as you, Van, I must say, and well done. I think it's absolutely commendable how quickly you've grown, and it's wonderful. I mean, you're a role model. I appreciate that. A role model for any entrepreneur that's trying to get out there. And I think, if anything, I think COVID actually will maybe accelerate you even more so. So just from my side, I think my mind shift, and I think this is just purely by looking at my associates like Vanessa and Jane, is to not have that local mindset, to start opening your mindset to having more of a global outlook. I think that, I know that we've got such amazing talent acquisition specialists, recruiters, and people that reside here in our local markets. And I think we can provide just as much good insight and case studies and success factors to the global market. I think we underrate it. I think we underrate ourselves and our ability as well. And I think we need to actually hang on to piggyback on Van and say, come Van, get some more voices out there, and let's start bridging that gap between the South African and the African market and the global market, because we need to get on the map more so. I think that's missing. I also think we mustn't underestimate that the biggest corporate employer brands have actually got all the answers. They are also navigating through a crisis, and they also don't have all the answers. And the nice thing is that a lot of them are actually being quite transparent about it as well. They're quite vocal about it. So don't think that you are not agile enough to go in, and don't underrate yourself or underestimate your ability. Because often these big cumbersome consultancies and organizations, their blanket DNA approach doesn't always work. That area of speciality and tailoring it as an agile small consultancy actually speaks far more volumes. So don't underrate yourself. That's what I'm seeing as well. The other thing is being close to networking with overseas subject matter specialists. Keep, again, we need to actually hook in with the subject matter specialists from overseas. Make sure that you actually reach out to them, bring them into our environment, into our territory, because it can only enrich our community. So those are really my sort of trends that I've seen, and what we need to leave behind in terms of our mind shifts.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Celeste. And I think you're not the only one. And I think we all kind of go through that, it's a constant balancing act. Yeah. And I think, as Van was saying earlier, it's just about us, I suppose, being, self-aware. Where am I at? I was sharing earlier that we actually did a learning conversation on Wednesday about stress and burnout. And afterwards I realized I actually need to take a break. So I took the rest of the afternoon off and lay in the sun. But yeah, it's really, we've got to keep in step. Otherwise we won't be able to do what we love. So I love what you've both been sharing. Sorry, Van, yeah?
Jade, I just wanted to say that also, I think that you coped really well. I mean, during this webinar, we've had all three of us, even though I don't think mine was as noticeable, had people walk into the rooms where we're now running away, where before we probably would have freaked out about it.
Exactly.
Handled it very well. So I've actually made a sign that says on air, and whenever I'm training or whatever, I put it on the door, because obviously it's hot now up here in Johannesburg, and my husband is taken to walking around, obviously with only a pair of shorts on. So he can nearly die when he walks into when I'm having a meeting, and I just start standing like this in front of my camera. So I think that there's been a funny side to the webinars and training and online too. So yeah.
No, I mean, speaking of that, we do actually have a sign on the door saying webinar in progress, but I don't think anyone sees it anymore.
No, exactly.
Desensitized.
Exactly. I would say.
But at least everyone has their clothes on. It's not as hot in Cape Town.
Yeah.
But I love also, Van, I love what you were saying about recruiters working, in more kind of a retained method rather than, contingent.
Jane, to be honest with you, I've done the same thing. So a lot of the clients that I've trained this year, I've said, take me on a retainer next year, because what I found was people will sit through 2 days of training. Then it's their decision. Again, it's not my decision. It's their decision whether they implement it or not. So what I've done with one of my 2 or 3 of my major clients, actually in the second part of this year, saying, hire me for a day a month or 2 days a month, and I'm going to work with 2 people of your team at once, and they're going to get inside my brain, because they're going to bring their toughest role. We're going to source it together. And with that, I'm actually feeling a lot calmer going into 2021, because I'm starting with a lot of retained clients who I know I've pretty much got, maybe not half, but a good portion of the 21 days in a month I have accounted for already, which is awesome.
Yeah.
No, great.
I think it's long. It's been long coming, and from a retention perspective, because I think recruiters have been abused fully up until now, and I think that it's also educational. It's going to be a transition, and I think if the industry sticks together and actually speaks through one voice by way of saying this is how it is, like with rates as well, with cutting of rates and tariffs and that kind of thing. If you can all stick to your guns and do that, then you're managing expectations holistically of the industry as a whole.
And I think it's also, Celeste, it also speaks to being true to yourself. I mean, I've had a lot of people approach me to do recruitment this year. Now, recruitment's not, full 360 recruitment's not really something that I want to be doing. But the one client who approached me and agreed to, you know, the going in at 20%, I mean, I'll be honest and I'll share, and I've been working for has been awesome. But people that I've gone back to with the 20% and they've come back and said, we only pay 12, I say, thanks for playing.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Good for you.
I'm not selling myself short.
Yeah, but I think
it's a lot of work to do full 360 recruitment, and it's not even my passion anymore.
Yeah, and exactly. I think we've, unfortunately, everyone hasn't been spoiled for choice, and they've had to bite the bullet and basically all work, not on retained work. They've had to just try and make good with that. And as I say, there's been abuse up until now, and I don't enjoy it at all. So I'm on the same page as you in terms of aligning.
Yeah, and I think that's why globally people are urging rather set up a payment plan rather than cut your fees, rather look at a way of adjusting, but don't cut your fees because otherwise you hurt the whole industry.
Exactly, 100%, Jane. 100%.
And it talks to what you were saying, Celeste, about people underrating themselves. I'll never forget, it really stuck with me. In the beginning of this year, weirdly enough, we had an in-person conference. I know you guys had Hung Lee in Joburg as well, Van. And we had him here in Cape Town, and I was part of that conference speaking with him. And I think something I said is, he said, so how are you feeling about it? And I was like, well, you know what? It's actually, you're here from overseas. I feel like you guys are so ahead of us. It almost feels like, you know, what are we as South Africans? How do we? And he said, no. He said, actually, wherever I go all over the world, people say that. They always feel like the grass is greener. People know more on the other side. But that's never the case. And I think the more I've been exposed to globally this year, being part of conferences, which like Van, I must say, at the beginning of this year, I was like, I want to speak at a global conference. And I never thought it would happen. And now it's happened 3 times this year. And I was like, what? So that's a one positive from COVID. But I think in that, I've seen, no, as South Africans, we're skilled. As South Africans, we actually lead the way in some ways. And especially what you were saying about diversity, Van. We've been working with this for years.
Absolutely.
And so we really have a lot to offer. And I love what you're saying about expanding your business globally and urging everyone to do that. I mean, we don't want to encourage a brain drain, but everybody is working globally. So we can stay and work all over the world.
Absolutely. And then you're bringing foreign currency back into the country, you know, which is amazing. Just touching on what you were saying about, you know, South Africans also in general feeling like second-rate citizens because, you know, everyone globally is so far ahead of us. That is absolute crap. You must see some of these teams I'm trading in the US and Australia when it comes to sourcing. I promise you, they are not even in the starting blocks yet, where our South Africans are pretty sharp and curious and have already done some work in that space before the training has even started. So from a sourcing perspective, sure, there's 1 or 2 people that you always see presenting at all of the sourcing conferences, but that is not a true reflection of the vast demographic of the country, that's for sure.
And people love South Africans. They're known for being hardworking. They're known for not giving up. So
I think it's that vote of confidence that we need to continually instill in our industry. That's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so question 3.
People. What is our time? 2:05. So let me branch off with question 3. What do we think 2021 will bring? The crystal ball question. So who should we start with? Celeste, Van, off you go.
I'll go. So basically, I'll start with that one because I've been thinking about it. I've got a little bit of a head start. Jane, it is a difficult question because, as you say, we don't have a crystal ball. My biggest concern is that I'm seeing it a lot now because I'm getting companies contacting me, asking me for rates for next year and those kind of things. Budgets are being set now. And I think the budgets are off the back of a tough year. So my concern in the recruitment industry, but in the training in the recruitment industry is that how much budget are people going to have to afford to, you know, get the talent acquisition teams trained up, et cetera, et cetera. But on a similar vein, I do see recruitment picking up. I don't think, you know, the US is experiencing their highest unemployment rates that they've seen since the Great Depression at the moment. However, even though we're seeing ridiculously high unemployment rates in this country, the skills that are in demand and what people are looking for are not the skills that are, or the people that are sitting at home watching Netflix at the moment, waiting for the next opportunity. So my biggest concern for the recruitment industry is that we still have a massive skill shortage. And this is not only in the tech space anymore. Sure, it's more predominant in the tech space, but it's across the board in South Africa. But my biggest concern, and I've been posting a lot about this in the SourceCon South Africa Facebook group and on LinkedIn this week, is that South Africans are going to get lured to work for international companies, because why wouldn't you? I do it myself. You know, I'm being hypocritical here. And what they're going to do is they're going to go and sit at home, work from home, because people can now work from anywhere, really. And they're going to sit at home, live in this beautiful country, live a great lifestyle where, you know, we have people helping us in our homes, etc., etc. We've got phenomenal weather. And they're not going to be available to work for South African companies because they're all working abroad. The good thing, yes, is that foreign, exchange is coming back into the country, and it's, feeding the economy, et cetera, but I don't know what it's going to do to the South African talent market. That's my biggest concern for next year, to be honest. From a personal perspective, 2021, as I've already touched on, is I'm trying to, make sure that get some more retained work coming in. I definitely want to grow more from a global perspective, carry on growing that side of my business. And I'm just pretty much, looking forward to seeing what will come its way. And that's the beauty of being a one-woman team, is that I can turn things away and I can accept other things. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens and what other crazy things I can be doing, because I never thought I would be offering, as part of my service offering this year, doing social media audits for ExCo teams, which I seem to have done a lot of. So yeah, let's see. Celeste, over to you. Sorry, there was just a question there from Lawrence, yes, that I just want to answer. Do you have any idea how many recruiters have left the industry in 2020? I would say, and this is not hard and fast, Lawrence, so don't quote me on it. I'd say from what I've heard, and I would actually ask ABSO around these numbers, is that up to 35% of agencies have closed. So I don't know how many of those people have managed to find work. There was a time during the pandemic I was getting 2 to 3 recruiter CVs a week, but again, because I can't follow up on everyone, I don't know whether those people have found other positions or what the story is.
I have seen some recruiters going into social media myself, people who contacted me and I connected them with marketing people. They've actually started to flourish in that industry just because they're naturally outwardly focused and good at communication. So, yeah. But Celeste, yes, your thoughts on what 2021 will bring?
So I agree with Van. I think change is inevitable. I think it's going to continue, most definitely. It's going to persist. I think, if anything, what it's also going to bring is the fact that we need to continue being knowledgeable. We need to continually be on top of what's happening from a global perspective, a local perspective, insights, trends, marketing changes. And this is the only way you're going to be able to stay relevant in your line of work. Whether you are specializing on the 360, holistic offering, or whether it is specifically at those different, areas of delivery and that, you're going to have to do that in order to survive. I think the unemployment rate is really worrying me. I've got a matriculant that's, going into tertiary education and that. So, and we've got about 100,000 matriculants that are they're all writing exams at the moment. What is going to happen to those people? So these kids. So this is a big concern of mine. I'm sure others as well. And it's going to impact the candidate experience as well, which is going to impact brands as well when it comes to employer brands and the manner in which you're dealing with candidates, whether you're an external recruiter or whether you are a recruiter within a corporate environment. Candidate experience is going to become more important more than ever before. And Van touched on marketing and HR working together, even more so. Inseparable. A consumer brand and an employer brand is inseparable. So whichever experience those consumers or candidates are having, it's going to impact profusely. The other thing is again, it goes back to what I initially said. I think it's essential that we continue from a consultative advisory perspective. As Van said, we need to change that whole mindset of just being transactional, talent acquisition, people that are putting bums in seats. We need to start molding and demanding that the role of a talent acquisition specialist is viewed quite differently. But then you have to earn it as well. And the way you earn it is going to be by becoming more knowledgeable, more insightful, and being able to walk the talk. Otherwise, you're not going to earn the credibility that you're looking for. So that's what I see in terms of, you know, where we're going next year. From a personal perspective, a personal agency and employer branding, fine-tuning that and being able to demonstrate that this is so much value add, and the fact that it's a living organism. All these brands are living organisms. They are continually moving. They are continually changing. And you have to get it right. Because whichever way you look at it, you're touching a brand, whichever shape or form. So I'm quite passionate about that. And I think that's what's going to be highlighted more so in the new year.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so true, Celeste. And that's something that has been highlighted in articles that I've been reading around people, you know, trying their best to predict 2021, is that recruiters are becoming more and more responsible for brands, and the companies that are being able to attract the best talent, it's becoming more and more closely linked to their employer brand.
Yeah.
And not just what they say, but what they actually do. So I think, there's a lot of focus on the work in your space and companies really needing to learn that. And how that links into the sourcing that Van focuses on. So important. And I think along with that is people being able to position themselves as experts, but they also need to not just have the knowledge of different industries and of recruitment, but they've got to learn how to influence, how to persuade, how to communicate with confidence. And I think that's where I've done some of my coaching this year, and I'd like to do more and more next year, is really helping people to articulate what's valuable to them, articulate their story and where they want to add value, and be able to market that and sell themselves effectively to companies. I think, again, in the recent conferences this week, we saw how this year, people have become more and more picky, if you like, if they can be, let's be honest, about where they work, because they've seen what they really value, because they've been able to spend time at home. Most people are saying, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful to spend more time with my family. I'm grateful to be able to do things that I didn't have time to do before. And so now when people apply for jobs, they're thinking, okay, is this worth taking time away from my family? And so it's so important to them that where they work and who they partner with shares the same values. Otherwise, they don't want to give up their time for that employer or that partnership or that contract.
Yeah, it's almost like it's not all about the package anymore, hey Jane. It's more about, okay, how much flexibility are you going to give me?
Exactly.
Yes, flexibility, and also, do you do something meaningful and purposeful in this life? You know, it's not just about earning money anymore. It's now, what difference are we making?
It's a way of life.
Those are important.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of life.
Way of life, and I think employer branding. I've heard things like empathy and empathy in action.
Yeah.
Being recent, that's repeated. I've heard that we all know the gig economy started before COVID. And so there's a lot of prediction around internal and external contracting happening more and more.
Yes.
So a lot of upskilling on specific skills and the so-called soft skills, and recruiters getting more and more involved in helping place people in contracts and not necessarily permanent roles.
Yes, good point.
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
They're saying is here to stay, even though some people are like, can I please just have a person in front of me and not my screen? They want to be able to have a hybrid at least.
Yeah.
So it's also about recruiters influencing that. So it's their ability to influence, not just be experts in their knowledge area.
Quite
that
right.
are important.
Quite right.
Yes, I think for me, I'm looking forward to being able to continue to upskill people through coaching, take them on a personal learning journey, partner with them and help them grow in the area that they uniquely and individually need to grow in. And also I'm excited about my training in to help people become strategic business partners, that they're not just doing what their clients ask them, but they're really partnering with their clients and helping uncover that value add and being strategic and building that trust. So I think those elements are exciting for me.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good Friday afternoon. You can now go and have a gin.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll take
chocolate.
you up on that.
Chocolates.